Did you know that it takes over a month just to reach the nearest star to Earth, let alone the Moon or other planets? In this video, we'll reveal all the captivating details that led to the creation and discovery of the first ever warp bubble, and how it can completely change space travel for all of us, making it safer and faster. Be sure to stick around to know all this mind-blowing technology that promises to make space travel as fast as light. Definitely not an unknown term, especially for Star Trek fans who must be pretty familiar with warp bubble concept. The Star Trek franchise has used this technology in their episodes that, while initially thought as too good to be true, scientists have finally made it possible. A static warp bubble, also known as a static warp ground, is a form of subspace deformation that creates a warp in the fabric of space. In much simpler terms, it's a kind of bubble that surrounds an entire spaceship and allows that spaceship to travel at speeds much faster than the speed of light. The speed is so high that it feels like you're being teleported to another dimension. The person using the technology loses sight of his entire journey because of traveling faster than the speed of light, which causes everything to go pitch black in his or her eyes. This teleportation or the traveling entirely depends on creating a stable threshold between the warp bubble and the outside environment. Such a warp bubble is actually powered by a warp drive technology. A warp drive is a device that bends the space-time continuum's shape. Unlike some other fictionalized faster-than-light technologies, such as the jump drive, the warp drive does not allow for immediate travel and transfers between two or more points, but rather involves a perceptible passage of time that is relevant to the concept. In science fiction, a warp drive, or a drive that allows for space travel, is one of several ways to travel through space. It's been suggested that it's conceptually similar to hyperspace. A spacecraft with a warp drive can travel at magnitudes of speeds greater than the speed of light. Although traveling faster than the speed of light was once thought to be impossible, technological advancement has repeatedly demonstrated that science is truly insane and can literally make anything possible. Warp drive is a fictitious application of the Alcubierre drive, which is a theoretical solution to the field equations of general theory of relativity. John W. Campbell introduced the general concept of warp drive in his 1957 book, Islands of Space. Although the concept of warp drive originally came through fiction, it did receive some scientific consideration, most notably in relation to the Alcubierre drive concept in the 1990s. In an email to William Shatner, Alcubierre stated that his theory was directly inspired by the term used in the television series Star Trek, and cites the warp drive of science fiction in his 1994 article. The problem with a material thing surpassing light speed is that it would require an innumerable amount of kinetic energy to travel at the speed of light. Warp drives are one of the science fiction tropes that help to overcome this limitation in fiction by allowing stories set on galactic scales to be told. However, the concept of space warp has been criticized as illogical, and it has been linked to a number of other rubber scientific concepts that do not fit into our current knowledge of physics, such as anti-gravity and negative mass. The concept of warp drive is not entirely new. It was first proposed in the 1990s, but it was improbable to believe that such a large amount of negative energy could be created, and what kind of matter would actually be likely to work under such conditions. In other words, scientists at the time simply didn't want to take a bigger risk by going along with this. Well, time passed and NASA scientists, including Harold White, conducted research and came up with other significant revisions to the long-existing theory of warp drive devices, unknowingly creating what they call a warp bubble. Dr. Harold G. Sonny White, a warp drive innovator and former NASA warp drive specialist, has reported successful manifestation of a real-world warp bubble. And according to White, his Limitless Space Institute LSI team's first-of-its-kind breakthrough provides a new starting point for those attempting to build a full-sized, warp-capable spacecraft. While conducting DARPA-funded research into Kashmir cavities and the energy density existing in those structures, the team discovered the existence of a warp bubble. White recognized the significance of the fluke discoveries, but claimed that it was only a small step toward actually building a warp drive. In other words, what scientists actually talked about was the discovery of a similar structure that could enable the development of a warp device. However, it was misperceived as the accidental discovery of warp bubble. Unfortunately, it is still difficult to confirm that they have actually created a warp bubble, and amidst accusations that scientists have unexpectedly generated a warp bubble, the warp device appears to be a long way off. But there is still hope, as a group of scientists led by Dr. Harold G. Sonny White has suggested a real-world structure that could be used to investigate the Kashmir effect. It's only a small step, but it's a step nonetheless. Our detailed numerical analysis of our custom Kashmir cavities assisted us in identifying an authentic and manufacturable nano-microstructure that is expected to generate a negative vacuum power density such that it would emerge a real nanoscale warp bubble, not an analog, White said in a statement to the publication. A warp drive necessitates the use of the Kashmir effect, which is a very tiny force of attraction that exists between two uncharged but conductive parallel plates held very close together. It was once considered a totally theoretical offshoot of relativity. However, now that we've seen it in real life, it's high on the list of real-world phenomena that scientists are looking into to figure out how we might actually finally solve the problem of interstellar space travel. Dr. White emphasized that his Limitless Space Institute (LSI) team's findings were centered on a legitimate, albeit humble and tiny, warp bubble rather than a warp bubble analog, and revealed that the framework predicts negative energy density that closely resembles requirements for the Alcubierre metric, thus the significance of the observation. The research paper, as prepared by the scientists involved in the study, describes an evaluation of the allocation of quantum vacuum energy around a spherical bead of silver-plated silicon fixed in the middle of a cylinder held between two parallel plates that produce enough negative density and Kashmir effect to enable the successful working of the Alcubierre metric or warp drive. The paper concludes by stating that scientists have learned how to produce the Kashmir effect without the use of exotic matter, and that if we want to make space itself contract, we should learn everything we can about spontaneous attractive forces found in nature. It's difficult to predict what the statement meant, but it is undeniably claiming that there is still a long way of study and research to go before a warp bubble could actually come into existence in the real world. Despite the intricate physics behind Kashmir cavities and the incredibly interesting quantum-scale forces commonly detected in these strange formations, some theories emphasize that Kashmir cavities have little to do with warp drive theory or mechanics. They had never been there before, at the very least. White and his LSI team, on the other hand, are enthusiastic about their work, which DARPA believes has a lot of potential. In the lab, we've not constructed a true warp bubble. The entire premise of real and analog is intended in the context of physics terminology. White clarified, well, it is difficult to burst the bubble, but the warp bubble or warp drive has yet to be fully developed and used. While White and colleagues have tested some of the science behind this discovery in the lab, the warp bubble itself remains a hypothesis based on calculations that White and colleagues have yet to confirm. However, White believes that if they succeed, it will have a significant impact on the science of warp speed space travel, and we hope that happens real soon. Be sure to check out your favorite SpaceX video here.